Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? I want to focus on gaming phones once again in this video, and you can see it in the title already. We're taking a look at the predecessor to an upcoming Nubia Red Magic device that everyone is really excited for. Gaming phones have really ramped up in the year that I have been working on this channel full time, and it's honestly been one of the best parts of the work that I do here because I get to play a bunch of video games, and it's great to see what these companies are trying to do for gamers in particular. So here's one example. This is actually not a very new phone. This is the Red Magic Mars, Nubia's phone from last year, or earlier this year rather, that is kind of like a spin-off because the Red Magic 3 is on its way at the end of this month, and that is an exciting phone. This gives us a glimpse into what that phone will be like though. You have the gamer-centric design. It's got a very aggressive aesthetic, but it's not a very thick device. And you have 4 ventilation areas on the back to dissipate the heat, along with the heat sink right over here. Keeping in line with the design aesthetic, you do have this sort of hexagonal fingerprint reader on the back, and it's nice to have a reliable rear-mounted fingerprint reader for a change. That way you know that it's going to work well, and it's in the perfect position. Once you get into the interface, it does have this sort of Mass Effect Commander Shepard sort of avatar here on the wallpaper, and then you get through all of the different elements that is basically stock Android with a bit of a skin on there. So it's a pretty familiar interface. It's not that hard to get in and out of all the different elements, and it's very familiar. You don't get a Google Now page over here, or at least my unit does not have that, but that's perfectly fine because what we really want to talk about here is this little toggle at the top, and you probably know where I'm going with this if you've seen my recent gaming videos. This is a trend that we're seeing in gaming phones that I love, and it's the game space. Red Magic have their own here, and it's a nice looking interface that shows you all of your different games. I put a bunch on here, and the ones that I put on here are games that I wanted to take advantage of an extra feature that Red Magic added to the Mars, and it has to do with these areas up here. These are triggers. So that you can actually put some R and L buttons up there, which makes some games a bit easier. And that includes, of course, everyone's favorite that we keep talking about in these gaming phones, PUBG Mobile. While I let that load, some thoughts on this particular phone as it pertains to the Red Magic 3, which everyone is super excited about. This one has the Snapdragon 845. It does have 128 gigabytes of onboard storage, 6 and 8 gigabytes of RAM if I'm not mistaken, and it has a large battery, but none of those specifications are going to hold a candle to what the Red Magic 3 is trying to provide. The Red Magic 3 apparently is going to have a 90 Hz refresh rate screen, which is already awesome, and then you have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which again, awesome, and it has the same general aesthetic, including an RGB light, which is going up and down the middle portion, just like on the Red Magic Mars, which I think is a nice, slightly more understated way of doing RGB on a phone when you compare it to some other gaming devices. Dual speakers are here so that you can have a stereo experience. But of course, without controllers, there is a controller that is supported by the Red Magic Mars, but it's not something that I have, at least, and it's only a one-sided controller so that you can use a D-pad of sorts. However, in this case, we're obviously going to be using the on-screen controls, but what I have here, if I show you, is the R and L buttons mapped to attack and in order to aim closer or to look down the sights of any guns that I'm using. So those are the 2 buttons that I have gone ahead and put the R and L down on. So it's nice to be able to just hit those buttons in order to have easy input. Oh, here we go. I'm not too sure what your grip might be like when you are playing games on your smartphones, but because the L and R triggers are a little bit more inside of the body, I do have to wrap my hands around a little bit more so that my knuckle is actually at the very corners. That way I can actually comfortably hit those buttons here on those sides, which is fine. It just had to teach me a bit of a newer grip. So maybe this is an esports grip that I'm learning. So just to illustrate for you real quick, I'm gonna use the left trigger to look down the sights. So that's really easy to do. That just makes life a little bit easier. That way I can look down the sights and still use my thumbs in order to move around, maybe strafe a little bit and aim. There you go. Now there's a good example of how these the controls actually help out. Ooh, he had a lot of stuff. All right, We're doing well. So I expect that the Red Magic 3 is going to be one powerful device, and one thing I'm really excited about with that phone is the fact that it has the Sony 48 megapixel sensor camera. That means that the camera experience, which is usually an afterthought on gaming phones, might actually be pretty good on that phone. Okay, I hate to do this, but I gotta go to a different game, and I figured that one which would make a lot of sense is this game, Max Payne. So you can see that on-screen controls are perfectly fine already on this phone. The 90 Hz refresh rate is probably going to make a lot of these games look even better, but that is of course dependent on whether or not the developers create games to take advantage of that refresh rate in the first place. All right, so that was Max Payne. So you can see where triggers like this might come in handy, especially for games like Grand Theft Auto. You want to have an attack button, basically anything that takes away some of the work from your thumbs. And finally, to show you some features that you could expect from the Red Magic 3, we have, of course, the RGB band on the back that I've mentioned already. There are a number of different patterns that are available for this, and they all look pretty dope. And to be honest, I love RGB on any of these phones. It's funny how the RGB everything of gaming on PCs has come to smartphones. And then this high performance mode. It's basically the ability to increase power consumption and heat generation, but then again, that's the reason why you have those 4 airways and also the heatsink down at the bottom. So as we get back into the smartphone area, this is going to be another example of a good gaming phone that happens to have some flagship smartphone capabilities. To be honest, I think that Red Magic finds that middle path between a super aggressive gaming phone like the Black Shark 2 or even the ROG phone and the more minimalistic style phones like the Razer phone and the Razer phone 2. It's somewhere in the middle. It makes for a phone that's not all that thick. It's pretty easy to handle in one hand, even though the screen has to be big enough to enjoy your games. And especially with those triggers on the sides, you have a bit of a comfortable grip that is encouraged by the extra inputs. So I want to know what all of you think. Have you used the Red Magic Mars? What has been your experience so far? And tell me what you are excited about for the upcoming Red Magic 3, the successor to the Mars that I have in my hand right here. Hopefully, again, I will have that phone for a full review. I love gaming phones, especially for traveling, because you can just put on a bunch of classic games, and if you have the tools to enjoy them comfortably, like a Bluetooth controller or inputs like on this phone, then travel, especially on long flights, turns out to be a little bit more fun. In any case, I will go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you again so much for watching. We are on the final stretch to 100,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, make sure you do so by hitting that button and consider hitting the bell on the side, because if you were here for this phone and you're excited for the Red Magic 3, you might want to know when I finally have that review out. So hitting that bell will certainly help you do that. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and call it on this one. Once again, thank you so much for watching. And until my next video, I will just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.